in this video I want to pay some attention to this Philips tube. In fact, it is a very old Philips tube. I think it is from the 1930s, perhaps the 1940s. But when we look at the construction, you only find, say, these kinds of constructions, this way that a balloon is made in tubes around 1920. It is the Philips Miniwatt 204. It is out of an oscilloscope of the 1940s, and it is a rectifier tube. That's all I can say. You can see here, perhaps it's visible in a kind of close look, a kind of spanned out electrode. It must be the cathode, and the anode is here. That piece of, say, steel or whatever, of course not steel, because it must be a special material. The materials used in these tubes of those days, and even in modern tubes, must not give out gases in a vacuum. And here inside of the tube there is a vacuum. So of course you can find the data sheet somewhere on the World Wide Web. 204. That number, I cannot recognize this number, 1876, but anyway. So it's a very interesting old tube, and here you can see that silver layer. That is the so-called getter, and the idea of the getter is that it is a certain substance that is activated from outside by an electromagnetic force, and then can pick up all the gases, residual gases inside such a tube. And this is a very old tube, but also in more modern radio tubes you see the same idea. It's well known. And here is say the socket, also a very old way of making a socket, a tube socket. Anyway, it's interesting. It's a beautiful old tube, say a kind of collector's item, and that's the reason why I save it in a certain way. The socket is somewhat loose here, anyway. So that was more or less all to tell. Thanks for watching. And when you look at old radio receivers or old rectifier circuits, at least in Europe, you can find this tube. And when I say old, I mean really old, say 1930s, perhaps 1950s. And by the way, in the 1950s, this technology, this way of making the balloons was already gone. Much more modern types of balloons were made in the 1950s. Also not with glass but with steel, etc., etc. Especially in America, the United States, there were many popular steel tubes in the 1950s. So again, thanks for watching. This is all that it is. Hope it is a little bit interesting. Consider it as infotainment, and wish you all the best.